Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. And today we're going to be continuing on in the 1800s and briefly describe some Jacksonian policies as well as the presidents in between Jefferson and Jackson. So let's get to it, people. Let me share my screen. So here we have Chapter 9, Jacksonian America. Okay, so, let's make it bigger. Okay, so the rise of mass politics. So this is, is known as the Age of Jackson, Jacksonian America. You have Jeffersonian, Jacksonian, you'll hear those terms tossed about quite a bit. So Age of Jackson. So more Americans, basically white males, participated in politics. The property requirements and tax paying requirements are going to disappear in many states. But as we know, voting was still not extended to women or African Americans. And Western states started to gain more prominence. You have something called the Dorr Rebellion in Rhode Island, which again forced conservatives in Rhode Island to adopt a new constitution that expanded suffrage, again getting rid of that property requirement in order to vote. So now you don't really have to own property in order to vote, and more people will vote. So here you have Jackson being inaugurated, the Dorr War. That's a book, The Fight for Reform in Rhode Island. Okay, so presidential electors, traditionally states presidents would be chosen by state legislatures and not by the people. But in 1828, all but South Carolina allowed the popular vote of electors, so more and more people began to vote in mass. So presidential election trends. In 1824, 27% of adult white males voted. 1828, it boomed up to 58% of adult white males, and in 1840, 80%. So a lot of an increase of people voting yes, mainly just whites though. And there's a book written by Alexis de Tocqueville, who wrote about democracy in America, and he wrote that it argued that America lacked typical aristocracies and people could rise and fall. So here's de Tocqueville. Here are the amount of people voting in presidential elections. So you see it's very high from, what was that, 1916? Between 1916, almost 100 years, 88 years, from here to there. So a lot of people voted way back in the day, and not so much in the 20th century, 21st century. All right, so the second party system, many believe parties were essential to democracy. Loyalty to the party was more important than ideology. So you have something under Jackson called the spoils system, where, it's patronage, and he would reward supporters with jobs, government jobs. And if that doesn't sound similar to Trump being acquitted for the second time, there you go. In 1830s, the two-party system was now at the national level. So you have the Democrats under Jackson and the Whigs under Henry Clay. Jackson was known as the common man president. He was the first president from the West, from Tennessee. And he advocated for equality for all white males. And he was against the wealthy Eastern establishments like the Bank of the United States, which he really did not like. And you also have the National Party Convention being created, and it renominated Jackson in 1832, and it replaced the Congressional Caucus So now more and more people will go to these conventions, become party members, and vote for who they want to be nominated from their party. All right. So it's what you see today: the Democratic National Convention, the Republican Party National Convention. So DNC, RNC, there you go. Those are those terms. So our federal union. So John C. Calhoun, pretty interesting guy. He was vice president under John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson under his first term. So that's 8 years in office. He wrote this book. It's very important. South Carolina Exposition and Protest, 1828. He urged states to nullify this tariff of abomination. Remember, that happened in the last chapter, where it benefited the manufacturing New England area merchants and all those people, and it did not help the South and the West. And where's Jackson from? Where is John C. Calhoun from? The South and the West. So he argued that states created this federal government, okay, and they had the ability to nullify federal laws. But John C. Calhoun was way ahead of his time because he didn't get a lot of people. He didn't get a lot of other states on board with this. Under Jackson, you also have this thing called the Kitchen Cabinet, where it's a group of official and unofficial advisors to Jackson. So they're not really held responsible for the things that Jackson eventually enforces, passes. So, because they're unofficial, they're not actually part of the government. Then you have this Webster-Hayne debate where it's state rights versus national power. Hayne was on the side of states' rights. Daniel Webster, national power. And Hayne advocated for nullification of this tariff of 1832 or 18, yeah, I think so. And in the second reply to Hayne, Webster advocated for national power, liberty, and union, now and forever, one and inseparable. Very famous. Again, talking about the fact that, the federal government ultimately oversees and is above the state government. So here you have John C. Calhoun. Here's the kitchen cabinet of Andrew Jackson, including Roger B. Taney, future Supreme Court Chief Justice. This is the Webster-Hayne debate. Continuing the nullification crisis, a big problem because South Carolina creates all of it. So John C. Calhoun resigns as vice president and becomes senator from South Carolina. And he, along with many others, are going to nullify the tariffs of 1828 and 1832, meaning that these tariffs do not apply to South Carolina. And so Henry Clay comes in and he makes the compromise tariff of 1833, which would reduce tariff rates by 10% per year for 8 years total, 8 years running. Remember, this tariff of 1828 and 1832 were high. On that same day, you have this force bill where the president can now use the military in the future to collect tariffs if need be. So here you have a map of tariff prices, and this compromise reduces it. So where is the year? I can't find the year. This is very small. I should have enlarged it. Okay, another thing that happens under Jackson, Native Americans. Well, what do we do with them? They're still, I would say to Jackson, they are still a problem because as land becomes more and more available out west, more and more people are encroaching on more and more native land. So Jackson advocated for the removal of natives west of the Mississippi. You have the 5 civilized tribes located in the South along Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida. The Seminoles, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, and I'm forgetting one more. Can't remember, but so those are the 5 civilized tribes, meaning that they would try and be more American and dress in their clothing, cut their hair, wear coats, tucked in shirts, pants, all that of the normal apparel of Americans at the time. They would go to schools, again, civilized. So you have the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which was aimed to move Southern tribes to the west of the Mississippi. In the court case, we talked about this, Worcester versus Georgia. The Supreme Court stated that natives could not be forced to move. But President Jackson ignored the decision. And it's going to lead to a lot of problems because this is where, the Supreme Court can overturn laws, uphold laws, but can they really enforce them? So Jackson just ignored the decision because it's the executive branch who enforces it, correct? Correct. So you have something in the Trail of Tears, winter of 1838. So this isn't under President Jackson. This is under his successor, Martin Van Buren. Winter of 1838, it was a forceful removal of thousands of natives, not 1,000, thousands of natives. And over 1 in every 8 will die during or shortly after arriving in the Oklahoma Territory that was meant for them. Trail of Tears, Trail of Tears. So Jackson and the Bank War, again, like I said, he disliked the Bank of the United States. So you have the Maysville Road veto, where Jackson vetoed a bill that was part of interstate commerce. Remember, whether or not the federal government has the overall power to fund roads, fund bridges, fund turnpikes, all of that. Jackson vetoed it because he didn't like the bank. So you have Nicholas Biddle. He's the president of the second charter Bank of the United States. And then a big thing that you guys need to know about is hard money, soft money. Hard money advocates are people who favored payment with gold and silver. And obviously the wealthy would favor this. Soft money advocates are people who favored paper money. And the poor would favor this. The farmers would favor this. And I mean, ultimately this would lead to inflation. Remember, because we're still on the gold standard. So this money is backed by gold and or silver. And when there's too much of it, that means there's not that much gold in supply. It leads to inflation. Oh, I forgot that. That's Nicholas Biddle. My bad. Nicholas Biddle. I was like, who is this guy? So the 1832 veto, Jackson vetoed the recharter of the Bank of the United States. Before the bank charter even expired, it would eventually expire in 1836. So Jackson, he just doesn't like it, okay? He's very anti-Eastern establishment, correct? So so he starts removing bank deposits. So Jackson removed all government bank deposits from the Bank of the United States and placed them in state pet banks. And now the Bank of the United States has no money. So Biddle called in loans because they need the money. And that's how banks work. If banks don't got money, they can't operate. That's going to lead to an economic crisis. And we're going to talk about that shortly. You have Roger B. Taney. He was Jackson's Treasury Secretary, and he was appointed Chief Justice of the Supreme Court after Marshall died in 1835. An important court case, one of his firsts, was the Charles River Bridge versus the Warren Bridge in 1837, which was about a monopoly over a bridge. And Taney and the court said that contracts could be breached if it benefited the community. Now, if you look back, the Dartmouth College versus Woodward, Marshall said that contracts could not be altered or changed or taken away. And now, if it benefits the community, they can be changed, they can be breached. So it reverses basically Dartmouth versus Woodward. Andrew Jackson, in his attempt to, he called the Bank of the United States a 7 he called it a seven-headed hydra. You know, if you think back to Hercules, the myth of Hercules, and this hydra, every time you cut off a head, one more grows. So Andrew Jackson over here trying to kill the Bank of the United States, trying everything, and that's Roger B. Taney. Yeah. So the changing the face of American politics. Now you have the Whig Party, which was formed under Henry Clay, formed in response to, quote, King Andrew the First. And the Whigs were in Parliament during the American Revolution. Those were the people who opposed King George III. Well, that's how they get their name transferred into American politics. They favored a strong central government. They promoted industry and internal improvements, especially in the West. You have the rise of the first third party, the anti-Mason party, and they were kind of anti-establishment, anti-secret society. And just know when Irish and German immigrants came, they tended to vote Democrats. That's King Andrew the First, and here are some cartoons for German Irish immigrants. Cartoons supporting the Know Nothing charge that Irish and German immigrants were stealing American elections. Granger Collection, New York. Okay. You have the Specie Circular, which is in 1836, where Jackson, or is this under, I think it was Martin Van Buren. All payments, actually, no, it's Jackson. All payments for land must be in gold or silver. And that's going to be controversial. Again, hard money, soft money. That's going to help contribute to the Panic of 1837. Probably until the Great Depression, the worst panic of its time. Again, remember, as I said in the last lecture, anytime you see a panic, it usually has to do with overspeculation. So that's buying something in hopes that it'll sell at a higher price later down the road. There are also going to be crop failures. There are also going to be panics in Europe. So that's all fun times. Not so no one ever affects. Hundreds of banks will fail. Unemployment's going to grow, and prices of land drop because of this. If people ain't got no gold or silver, how can they buy land, right? So then you have the independent treasury, which was established by Martin Van Buren. The government money would no longer be in private banks. So America's first Great Depression, economic crisis, there you go. And that's a book, if you want to read it. That was gold. So you have the election of 1840, Martin Van Buren versus Tippecanoe and Tyler too. This is kind of the first election where you see nicknames and slogans, and Tippecanoe was William Henry Harrison, and you have other quotes: log cabins and hard cider get the ball rolling. You have William Henry Harrison died 30 days into his presidency. This is the famous president, if you want to call him famous. He is famous for giving in his inauguration speech. Remember, inauguration speeches weren't until like March. And as you know, it's very cold in the eastern part of the country, where it's very cold. And this guy didn't wear a top hat, didn't wear a petticoat. So he gets pneumonia and the flu, and he dies. So his successor is Tyler. He's called his ascendancy because this is the first time where an actual president has died and his successor is his vice president. So you have, he was a Democrat at heart and he hated Jackson personally. And then you have three foreign, I guess, why can't I think of the word? I can't think of the word. Voice crack. We need to drink some water here. three instances of situations with foreign nations. You have the Caroline, which was the British attacked a ship that killed one American in the Midwest, or is that New York, the Niagara River? You have the Aroostook War, where there was conflict between lumberjacks in Maine and Canada, and you have what's called the Webster-Ashburton Treaty, which settled this boundary dispute in Maine, and it's finally decided the boundary of Maine. Because as you know, if you go above Maine, there's no there's Maine's not the end. There's land above Maine that is part of Canada. And you have the ship, the Creole, where hundreds of slaves took over the ship and they fled to the Bahamas. And that's going to worry a lot of Southerners because they get their slaves from the Bahamas. And that's going to worry them from, being overthrown and, their ships taken. So here's William Henry Harrison, Tippecanoe, and Tyler too. Here's Tyler. Here's the get the ball warning rolling. Okay, Okay, so two treaties you need to know: the Webster-Ashburton Treaty, which resolved the boundary dispute between Maine and Canada. We just discussed that. And you have the Treaty of Wanghia. Sorry if I butchered that. And this is in 1844, constructed by a guy named Caleb Cushing, where Americans received trading rights in China. And it's going to lead to this idea of extraterritoriality, where if Americans committed crimes in China, they would be extradited and be charged and taken back and tried under an American court. And that's going to cause a lot of problems in the future. So that's Webster, that's Cushing. And that's the end of the lecture. Hopefully you guys did enjoy that. I know I probably talked a little bit faster, but kind of follows the same in your books. So that's President Jackson, King Jackson. So anywho, hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, make sure you smash that like button. And as always, stay safe, wash your hands. Peace.